The woman at the table next to me leaned over to her husband and whispered something. He looked up, glanced at me, then quickly looked away. I saw the pity in his eyes before he could hide it. That was the moment I knew, not that my marriage was broken. I'd known that for years, but that I was finally done pretending it wasn't. Let me back up. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old, and for 7 years I was married to a man who could charm a room full of strangers in under 5 minutes and make me feel invisible in our own kitchen. His name is Daniel. He's 42, runs a regional sales team for a logistics company outside of Columbus, Ohio, and if you met him at a backyard barbecue, you'd think he was the most generous, easygoing guy in the room. He'd refill your drink before you asked. He'd remember your kid's name, your dog's name, what college you went to. He had this gift, this real, genuine seeming gift, for making people feel like the most important person in the room. I just wasn't ever in that room. I'm a licensed occupational therapist. I've spent my career helping people rebuild their lives after strokes, accidents, surgeries, teaching them how to button a shirt again, how to hold a fork, how to walk through their own front door without fear. I'm good at what I do. I'm patient. I'm used to measuring progress in millimeters. I think that's partly why it took me so long to see that in my own life. I wasn't making progress. I was just getting more practiced at shrinking. We met in our early 30s at a mutual friend's birthday party in Cincinnati. He was funny and attentive, and he called me 2 days later like a person who actually wanted to call, not 3 days later like someone following a rule book. I thought that meant something. For a while it did. The shift was gradual. That's the thing nobody tells you. It doesn't arrive like a storm. It comes in like weather you barely notice, a few degrees cooler, a slightly longer shadow. He started making comments about how much I was working. Not mean comments, careful ones. I just miss you, that's all. Then it was about my friends. Does Rachel always talk that much? I don't know how you listen to her for hours. Then it was about the way I spent money, not our money, my money, the paycheck I deposited into my own account. You bought new running shoes. Weren't your old ones fine? By year 3, I had quietly stopped mentioning Rachel. By year 5, I was buying running shoes and hiding them in my trunk for 2 weeks before bringing them inside. I told myself this was normal. I told myself every marriage had friction. I told myself I was a therapist who helped other people navigate hard things, so surely I could navigate this. What I couldn't navigate, what I still can't fully explain, was how completely I lost the thread of who I was before him. It happened so slowly that I didn't even have a moment I could point to and say, "There, that's where she went. She just dissolved, like salt in warm water." The graduation day is where this story really begins. I had gone back to school part-time 3 years earlier to get my doctorate in occupational therapy, a clinical doctorate, the OTD. It meant evening classes twice a week, online coursework on weekends, a capstone project that I worked on at the kitchen table after Daniel had gone to bed because he got irritated if I used my laptop in the living room while he was watching TV. It took me 2.5 years. I did it while working full-time. I did it while making dinner and doing laundry and maintaining the life that apparently required my constant invisible labor to keep running. He knew about it. Of course he knew. He'd even seemed proud early on, told his co-workers his wife was getting her doctorate, said it at dinner parties in a way that suggested some of the accomplishment was his. But as the months went on and my attention was divided, the pride curdled into something else. Little comments. Is this degree actually going to change your salary? I feel like we never just sit together anymore. I don't know why you're stressing yourself out like this. Nobody's making you do it. Nobody except me. I was making me do it. That was the part he couldn't seem to understand, that I was allowed to want things for myself. My graduation ceremony was on a Saturday in May. The university held it at a performing arts center downtown, a real venue, not a gymnasium, with actual seats and good lighting, and a reception afterward in the lobby with champagne and little cheese plates. My parents drove up from Lexington. My friend Rachel, the one I had quietly stopped mentioning, drove 2 hours from Pittsburgh because I finally called her in February and told her what the last few years had actually looked like, and she cried and said she'd been waiting for that call. and she was at my door with wine within the week. Daniel said he would be there. He said it clearly and without hesitation when I bought the tickets 3 months out. He said it again when I told him where to park. He texted me the morning of, "I'm so proud of you, babe." And I felt something loosen in my chest, this small hopeful thing I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I put on the regalia. My mother cried, taking pictures in the hotel lobby. My dad shook my hand very formally and then hugged me for a long time without saying anything. Rachel straightened my cap and said, "You look like the smartest person I've ever met." And I laughed, and it felt like the first real laugh I'd had in months. The ceremony started at 2. My section walked across the stage around 3:15. When they called my name, Dr. Claire Merritt, I looked out at the audience the way you do, automatically, the way every person does in that moment, looking for your people. My parents were there. Rachel was there, standing up already, clapping too loud. Daniel's seat was empty. I smiled anyway. I shook the dean's hand. I walked back to my row and sat down and stared at the stage and breathed through my nose and told myself there was probably an explanation. Car trouble, work emergency, something. I told myself this while knowing, in the quiet center of myself, that there probably wasn't. He texted at 4:47, 20 minutes into the reception. Something came up at the office. "Really sorry. Celebrate tonight?" I was standing next to my mother when it came in. She watched my face and didn't ask. She just put her hand on my arm, lightly, and kept talking to the woman beside her, as if nothing had happened. That small grace from her. That decision not to make me explain. I've thought about it many times since. Rachel brought me a glass of champagne. "He's not here, is he?" It wasn't a question. "Something came up," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "Claire, I know, no, I mean you just walked across a stage and got a doctorate while working full-time in a marriage that has been." She stopped herself. "You just did something enormous. And he couldn't show up." I drank the champagne. "I know." I got home at 7. Daniel was on the couch watching a game, still in his work clothes, though his tie was loosened in the particular way that meant he'd been comfortable for a while. "Hey, Dr. Merritt," he said and smiled, and I noticed that the smile didn't reach further than his mouth. "What came up?" I asked. "Randall called a last-minute thing. Budget review before the Q2 close. I couldn't skip it, it was mandatory. On a Saturday. Sales doesn't work 9 to 5, you know that." I went upstairs and changed out of my dress. I hung the regalia carefully in the closet. I sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes looking at the floor. Here is what I found out later, not that night, not for another 3 weeks, but eventually there was no budget review. There was a golf afternoon with Randall and 2 other guys from his team. I found out because Daniel left his personal email open on the shared laptop, and there was a thread with Randall that included a photo. The 4 of them on a course somewhere, someone's arm around someone's shoulder. Everyone squinting into the sun and grinning. The timestamp on the photo was 3:12 in the afternoon. 2 minutes before they called my name. I sat with that for a long time. I want to be careful here because I know how these stories can go, and I don't want to flatten what was actually a complicated and painful realization into something that sounds clean in retrospect. The truth is, I didn't immediately become a different person. I didn't have a movie moment where I stood up and knew exactly what to do. I sat with the photo. I closed the laptop. I made dinner. I lay next to him in bed that night and stared at the ceiling and felt something I can only describe as a kind of clarifying grief, not new pain, but old pain finally arriving at its right name. The word, I think, was enough. Over the next few weeks I started paying attention differently, not looking for things. I wasn't trying to build a case, just letting myself actually see what had been in front of me. And what I saw was this: Daniel had a system. Not a spreadsheet like some story you'd read online, nothing that dramatic, but a system nonetheless. He knew exactly how much he could push before I'd pull back, and exactly how to soften the edges when I started to. A compliment here, an unexpected thoughtfulness, flowers once, reservations at that Italian place I loved. Just enough to keep the needle from falling too far. I also started paying attention to what I had given up piece by piece, so gradually I hadn't noticed the accumulation. The girl's tricks I declined because he got quiet when I mentioned them. The promotion at work I hadn't pursued because he'd said, "Do you really want that kind of stress?" The savings account I'd stopped contributing to because it seemed to bother him that I had money he didn't know the details of. I called a therapist, a real one, not a colleague, someone with no connection to any part of my life. Her name was Dr. Anita Soles, and she had an office in a converted Victorian house on the east side, and she wore interesting earrings, and she did not let me get away with anything. In our third session, she said, "What would you need to have in place before you could leave?" I said, "I don't know if I'm leaving." She said, "What would you need to have in place if you decided to?" That question changed the structure of my thinking. I stopped asking myself whether I was going to leave and started asking myself what it would take to be able to. Those are different questions. The second one had actual answers. I contacted a family law attorney in April. Her name was Patrice Coleman. She had a 4.9 on Google and a corner office downtown, and a way of delivering information that was direct without being cold. I learned about Ohio's equitable distribution laws. I learned what marital assets meant in practice. I learned what documentation I should have and where to keep it. I opened a personal checking account at a different bank. I started having a portion of my direct deposit routed there. Nothing dramatic, just consistent, just mine. I had a conversation with my HR department about my 403B and made sure I understood exactly what was in it. I called Rachel and I told her what I was thinking. She drove down the following weekend and we sat in my backyard while Daniel was at his brother's, and she said, "What do you need from me?" Just that. Not "finally," or "I told you so," or anything I would have deserved given how long I kept her at a distance. Just, "What do you need from me?" I told her I needed a place to stay when it was time. She said her guest room was already made up. Then came the work conference. Daniel's company holds a regional sales summit every spring. It's 2 days in Columbus, and it matters. It's where the year's top performers get recognized, where promotions get announced, where the dynamics of the team reshuffle visibly in ways everyone notices. Daniel had been angling for a senior regional director role for 18 months. He talked about it with a focus that I had never, not once, seen him direct toward anything involving us. He was a finalist. He knew it. The announcement would happen at the summit dinner on Friday night. 2 weeks before the summit, he came to me. He needed help. He'd been asked to submit a leadership narrative, a 2-page written statement about his management philosophy, his team's performance metrics, and his vision for the role. Writing was not Daniel's strength. He knew it. He asked me to help, and here is where I have to be honest about something uncomfortable. My first instinct was yes. Not because I was afraid to say no, not entirely, but because some part of me still wanted to be useful to him. Still wanted to be the person who helped. I had spent 7 years making myself indispensable in quiet ways, and the habit ran deep. I said I'd think about it. I talked to Dr. Solis about it that Thursday. She asked me what helping him would cost me. I thought about it, really thought about it. And what I said was, it would cost me the truth. Because if I help him get this promotion, he gets to keep thinking everything is fine, and nothing is fine. She nodded. She didn't tell me what to do. But I left that session knowing. I told Daniel I was too busy with a patient documentation backlog at work. He was frustrated but not suspicious. I had established enough of a pattern of being reliably helpful that one instance of being unavailable didn't register as a pattern shift. He wrote the statement himself. It was fine. Not great, but fine. The summit was on a Friday and Saturday. Thursday evening, Daniel packed his bag and kissed me on the cheek and said, "Wish me luck." He had his good suit. He was excited in the specific way he got excited. Quieter than usual, focused, already somewhere else in his head. "Good luck," I said. I meant it, actually, not for the promotion. I meant it in the larger, sadder sense of wishing someone well on a road you're no longer walking beside them. Friday was a regular work day for me. I saw 4 patients in the morning. I had a staff meeting after lunch. I drove home and I sat in the driveway for a few minutes with the car off before going inside. The house was quiet in a way it almost never was. I made pasta for dinner. I called my mum. I texted Rachel and told her that I was ready. Not tonight, not this weekend, but soon. I was ready. She sent back a single word, whenever. Daniel called around 9. The dinner was going well. He thought the VP had made eye contact with him during the recognition remarks in a way that felt meaningful. He was talking fast, the way he did when he was nervous and happy at the same time. That's great, I said. I might actually get this. Maybe so. A pause. You okay? You sound weird. I'm just tired, I said. Long week. Right, yeah. I'll be back tomorrow night. We'll celebrate either way. Sure, I said. Get some sleep. Love you. I didn't say it back. I said, good night, Daniel. And he didn't notice, or if he did, he let it go, because the evening was going well and he was thinking about the promotion, and I was, as usual, not quite in the room where his attention lived. Saturday morning I drove to Rachel's. I had 2 bags in the trunk that I packed over 3 weeks, one item at a time. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would look like I was leaving if he happened to open the closet. My documents were in a folder in my work bag. The number for Patrice Coleman was saved under dentist in my phone. I left a letter on the kitchen counter, not an email, not a text. A letter, printed, signed. I had worked on it for 2 weeks. It said what needed to be said without venom, without performance. It said that I had loved him, that I believed he was capable of becoming someone who didn't need to make his partner small to feel large, and that I hoped he would do that work. It said I had been to see an attorney and would be in touch through her office. It said I was safe and that he should not come to Rachel's, which was the only place he would think to look, because I would not be there. That last part was a small practical deception, and I don't apologize for it. Rachel's guest room was exactly where I was going. But I needed the buffer. I needed the weekend before the world rearranged itself around this new fact. I found out about the promotion through a mutual friend 3 days later. He didn't get it. The VP had apparently been more impressed by another candidate, a woman on the team who Daniel had always dismissed slightly, in that careful way he had, the way that never sounded like dismissal unless you were paying close attention. She'd submitted, I was told, a genuinely excellent leadership narrative. I won't pretend I was neutral about that. I felt something. Not cruelty. I don't think it was cruelty. It was more like the particular silence after a long noise finally stops. The divorce took 7 months. Patrice was worth every dollar. The settlement was equitable in the legal sense and in the human sense. I left with what I contributed, and I left with clarity, which is worth more than I can calculate. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in late October. It had original hardwood floors and big windows, and a 2nd bedroom I turned into a home office. The first morning I woke up there. It was a Sunday, and I lay in bed for a long time listening to nothing. No one's breathing but my own. No low-level alertness I'd been keeping up for years without realizing. The monitoring, the managing, the constant small calibrations. Just quiet. I called my mum. I called Rachel. I made coffee and sat by one of the big windows and watched a dog walker navigate 3 very different sized dogs down the street, and I laughed for the first time in a while at something that had nothing to do with managing anyone's feelings. I want to say something to anyone who's watching this and recognizing parts of it, not the specific details. Everybody's details are different, but the feeling of having made yourself smaller and smaller until you couldn't quite remember what full size felt like. I want to say you're not wrong about what you're experiencing. You're not too sensitive. You're not failing at marriage. You're probably just very, very tired from doing all the work of holding someone else's reality together while yours was quietly coming apart. The question Dr. Solis asked me, what would you need to have in place? I think about it a lot. Not just in the context of leaving. I think about it as a general life practice now. What do I need to have in place? Not what does someone else need? Not what would make someone else comfortable. What do I need? It sounds so simple. It took me 7 years to be able to ask it. I'm a different person now than I was in that ceremony hall in May, watching the empty seat. Not louder or more dramatic. Actually quieter in some ways. But the quiet is mine now. It doesn't belong to someone else's bad mood or someone else's need for control. It's just still. Solid. Like ground you can actually stand on. The running shoes I bought last spring are worn out already. I bought new ones last month and brought them directly into the apartment, put them right by the front door. It felt like nothing. It felt like everything. If you've stayed this long, thank you. If any part of this felt familiar, I hope you'll sit with that feeling instead of explaining it away. You know what you know. You've known it longer than you've admitted it. The rest is just finding out what you need to have in place. I've thought a lot about what actually caused everything that happened, not in a dramatic searching for blame kind of way, but practically. Honestly, because I think if you're going to learn anything from a hard season of your life, you have to be willing to look at your own part in it, not just theirs. Daniel didn't become who he was in a vacuum, and I didn't stay as long as I did because I was weak. I stayed because I was patient in the wrong direction. I applied every skill I had, the listening, the adapting, the measuring progress in millimeters, to preserving something that had already stopped being worth preserving. That's not a moral failing, but it is a pattern, and patterns have consequences. His behavior grew because it was never met with a real boundary. Mine shrank because I kept choosing peace over truth. That's the cause and effect nobody talks about, not the dramatic version. The quiet one. Every time I explained away a dismissal, I taught him it was acceptable. Every time I bought running shoes and hid them in my trunk, I confirmed to myself that my own small wants were things to be concealed. We were both, in our different ways, reinforcing a dynamic that was slowly taking something from each of us. Him, the chance to grow into a better person. Me, the version of myself I'd actually worked to become. What I know now is that integrity, real integrity, not the performative kind, is just consistency between what you believe and how you live. For years, those two things in me were completely misaligned. I believed I deserved to be seen. I lived like I didn't. Closing that gap was the actual hard work. Not the attorney, not the apartment, not the packed bags. The hard work was deciding that what I believed about myself was true enough to act on. The intelligence piece took longer to name. Not book intelligence. I had that. I mean the specific intelligence of paying attention to your own life, of not letting the story you're telling yourself run so far ahead of the evidence that you stop being able to see clearly. I was a trained clinician. I helped other people identify patterns and modify behavior for a living. And I spent 7 years failing to apply that same careful observation to my own front door. There's no judgment in that, just an honest accounting. Awareness that stays only in the professional lane isn't really awareness. It's compartmentalization dressed up as competence. And the resilience, that's what Rachel saw in me before I saw it in myself. She drove 2 hours to sit in my backyard. She didn't try to fix it or rush it. She just made herself available, consistently, and waited for me to be ready. That's what real support looks like, and it matters, because resilience isn't something you manufacture alone in a quiet room. It builds in relationship. It builds when someone you trust reflects back to you that you are still whole, still capable, still worth showing up for. The day I walked into my apartment in October, hardwood floors, big windows, nobody else's mood in the air. I wasn't a finished person. I was a starting one. And that felt, after everything, exactly right.